Hey everybody, I want to talk to you today about guilt and shame. And these are two very powerful emotions that tend to really deteriorate people's quality of life. They can be extremely negatively balanced in the body and in the mind. And really, like I said, affect people's mental health and to a great degree. I just want to talk about what you can do if you're experiencing these emotions repetitively, if they're causing spiraling thoughts, for example, which I got a good question about before. So guilt and shame, very powerful emotions. And there are some solutions for you here. So the first thing to think about is just on a overall level, why these emotions exist. And now they're part of a group called the self-conscious emotions, which includes guilt, shame, jealousy, embarrassment, and pride. And obviously there, pride is the only one we typically associate with positive feeling. So a lot of negativity can come from these emotions, but overall, as a society, we need them because they regulate people's behaviors. Imagine a society with no guilt, no remorse, things like that. So they do serve positive functions in society, which is why we still have them and why we still rely on them as a species. The point, another point to think about here is that the difference between guilt and shame, and remembering how helpful it is to name an emotion and then dig deeper into it. So, guilt is about an action, while shame is about you as a person, your identity, and who you are. So, we feel guilt so we know we need to change our actions in the future. We feel shame because we feel we need to change something about ourselves. So that's pretty serious, right? You think about how deep that goes. First of all, my advice is to differentiate which one are you feeling, because a lot of times we will feel guilt over an action and then internalize it and just make shame ourselves. So think about which one it is, then think about, is the emotion serving you? So I want to talk a little more about why it is that people may have a pattern of if experiencing so much guilt, so much shame. So you can think about guilt and shame as a parent, as a teacher. These are tools that parents and teachers use all the time to manage their students and their children's behavior. So if a child is speaking while the teacher's trying to give a lesson, they may shame the child. Now, it's not good practice, not anymore, but it happens all the time, and make a child feel guilty, and parents are doing this too. Now, I'm not the one to say you should never guilt or shame a child. These can be healthy emotions when done in moderation. But what happens is that we get positively reinforced for feeling these emotions, and so we tend to cling to them even if they're affecting us negatively. We tend to cling to them as being good for us. So if I'm a student in a class and I can't control my actions and I'm speaking a lot, or I'm just being disruptive and I get shamed into changing, then I'll experience positive reinforcement from the teacher, maybe from other students for that change. And so now in my mind, shame is positive, right? And that's just one example, and there's many. Try to think about that of if you're having spirals, if you're experiencing guilt and shame excessively, thinking about kind of these patterns develop and it's not your fault. This is, again, how we use these emotions to regulate, and so we can learn a lesson or just cooperate in many ways. So that's just something to think about. Now, when it comes time to kind of undo these patterns, and this is what I help people with, just recognizing, is this emotion beneficial to you right now? So these emotions can serve a lot of positive functions. You should feel guilt if you've done something wrong, for example. But if you've already changed your behavior, or if you know what you need to change in the future, you shouldn't feel guilt about it too long. So that's the one thing. Is it serving you? And identify the corrective action you need to take. And then secondly, making sure that there's nobody in your environment who is making you feel these emotions unnecessarily. So this would be gaslighting. And this kind of happens too much, unfortunately. But bosses do this, partners do this, sometimes unintentionally. But let's say if somebody is trying to, if I'm a boss and I'm trying to get more out of this employee, and I'm pretty aggressive with it, I'll shame them, make them feel lazy, say little things like, "Oh, you didn't get to that assignment, huh? Well, what were you doing?" And just things like that. So there's the first thing is just to be aware of check your environment. Is there somebody who's doing this to you? Because that's pretty serious, and you need to address that. And so once you've gone through that and made sure that nobody in your environment is gaslighting you or forcing you to feel these emotions, and you can kind of understand that this is a pattern that you've developed. Now, just knowing that it's a pattern, unfortunately, is not enough. We have to use strategies to overcome them. And one strategy that I love from the immunity to change framework that I learned at Harvard is called the observation exercise, where, after working with me or, just on your own, uncovering some of the assumptions that are driving these emotions. So, for example, if I'm feeling shame that I'm not a good partner, maybe there's a couple incidents that would have suggested that, and I've internalized it completely to think, I assume that I'm not a good partner, I'm not worthy of love, many things like that. We can have an observation exercise where 7 to 10 days you go and you look for examples where that is true. Maybe it is partially true, and maybe it is you need to change some things. So we'll look for examples where it's true, but we'll also look for examples where it's not true. Examples where you're being a good partner, a supportive and loving partner, and things like that. And this is just one example. It applies to literally every scenario. It's amazing, this exercise. And so after those 7 to 10 days, come back and you reflect. So you can do this with a coach. You can do this on your own. And I love teaching people that my whole framework is designed to teach people these methods so that they don't have to rely on anyone else, in fact, and they can teach them to other people. It's really great. And another tool that you can use is what's called the biography exercise. You don't have to do this, but like I said earlier, a lot of times this comes from childhood, and we're rewarded for feeling these emotions by others around us, and so we latch onto them and use them too much. So you can do the biography exercise where you're looking back about key events in your life where maybe you felt this emotion really strongly. And so this is another tool. It's not always necessary, but sometimes it helps people to understand why they have these patterns, and it can be really helpful in that way. So I hope you found this video helpful for your daily life if you're experiencing these things, and please do reach out if you want to learn more about these techniques.